The seasons of our lives, guys. Each of our lives has a season. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Every life. So clearly the winter time, the birth of the new year, which starts at the winter solstice, which is approximately December 21st, but it can range between December 21st through that 12-day period, which is the center of that is Christmas Day. Not Christmas Day represents not just the birth of Christ, as most people know by now. It also is a representative of the birth of the new year. In your life, your winter, coming out of the void, the birth of you is your winter. And as you grow from infant stage through spring, that's kind of like your childhood. And then you go through your summer, which is representative of your adolescence. And your fall time represents from everywhere from the peak of your adulthood all the way down to the death of you. Well, how do you measure a human life? Do you measure it by the number of years that a person has been alive? The truth of this is that's not how God measures a human life. There are many people that are lived in the Bible. Some lived 1,000 years. Some lived a couple hundred. Some lived 50. Some lived 20 and 30. Jesus didn't live 1,000 years before he was put on the cross. But I'll tell you that how his life progressed follows the same pattern as Adam, who lived 900 so years. And how God measures how old you are has nothing to do with your age. It has everything to do with how far along are you in your life purpose. Have you done what you've come here to do or not? If it's mission accomplished, your life ends. This is something that pastors don't want to talk about, but I will go ahead and say this because it's the truth. If you are still alive, whether you are 50, 100, 20, or 15, regardless of whatever number is associated to your age, your purpose is your true age. And if you've done what you came here to do, your life on this planet will end. If you're someone who is up in years, or if you're someone who has different kinds of ailments, whatever you've got, you will survive until you have done your purpose on this earth, according to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Your purpose must happen. And this is true whether you're a Christian or not. This is true even if you're the Pharaoh of Egypt or the Antichrist. You will survive until your purpose on this earth is fulfilled. Whether it be a godly purpose or whatever. Because God uses evil people as much as good people. So what does this mean? This means you can go about your life with no fear whatsoever of death. And whatever your purpose is under heaven, you will survive until that purpose is fulfilled. That's why you're alive. As a male ages in his life, a male starts off with a tremendous amount of energy. And as a male goes on, he expends that energy until he's more or less used up. And depending on what kind of man you are, depends about how used up you're going to be later on in your life. Some people use it all up early on. You probably met a lot of men like that. They had a dramatic spark early on, but they kind of putter off at the end. And then there's some men who start off early in their life and they don't say a whole lot. Their temperament's kind of quiet and they hold back until later. And then later on. But for men, if they don't use what they have, it blows up in their face. It gets used up anyway. You've got to use what you have. And depending on what kind of firework that you are as a man, depends on how it plays out. And many people are just firecrackers. Women do the opposite. They are gatherers. They get the opposite. They spend a lifetime accumulating energies. But I will say that your lifespan is extended relative to how deeply you've been touched. The less that you've been touched, now I don't mean just how much hanky-panky you've had. What I mean is real touch. How deeply within the core of yourself have you been touched? Now, if you've had kids, you could say you've definitely been touched a little bit. How deeply you've been touched is a predictor of your lifespan. This is something you need to know as a female All right, I'm not an expert on females, but I can tell you this with certainty. With certainty. If you've spent your whole life looking for real love as a female, and you've only received fake love, you're probably going to live a long time. If you spent your whole time looking for real love and you experienced real love on the deepest and most profound level, that will reduce your lifespan. There are things that are worth the pain. That is the lesson that you learn as a female. Is giving birth to a baby worth the pain of the love that you feel from the baby? So there's a limit to how much a boyfriend can touch you, although it can go pretty deep. And there's a limit to how deeply a husband can touch you, which can also go pretty deep if you've got one that really cares and listens and goes there. But the way that Christ, God himself, can touch you is the kind of love that's liberating. It will be the last thing you feel as you enter heaven. Well, how does that work? Well, there's a reason why God is really gentle with you. There's a reason why God is very patient, and why God wants you to live a certain way, because God loves you just the way you are. And as you cry out to God, touch me deeper, I can't feel your love, and all this other stuff, and you want more love from God, you better be ready. Jesus loved us so much that he received a kind of pain and suffering that no other man ever has. Only women can relate to the amount of pain and suffering that Jesus Christ experienced on the cross. Unless you have become born again in the Spirit, which is a real experience. It's not a, hey God, have you forgiven me? Thank you, now I'm a Christian. You must know God. As a female, it's the opposite. All you need to do as a female is receive, sit back, and be willing to be touched by the most powerful force in the universe. But as a man, you have to go after him if you want to see God. God will come to you if you're a female. You might not think what I'm saying is biblical, but it is. And there's a difference. It's unfortunate that pastors out there do not outline the difference between the male and female path. They're not the same. So a pastor who's given out a universal kind of sermon on this is what everybody should do, sometimes they're being very insensitive to the women in the audience, because they don't realize that for a woman to experience God is an incredibly painful process, as well as a loving process. But how a man does it is a man empties himself of his ego. He empties himself of his ego. He sets off the firecracker within himself. That's how he does it. The difference is a woman gets that firecracker put on her. And there's a difference. Well, it's not that you're being the victim, but the nature of your journey, I'm just going to say it, is harder. It is harder being a woman. I can tell you that. Because all you have to do as a man to experience God, I'm just letting you know, as a man, the only thing you really have to do is to seek God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to relinquish your ego. As a female, that ego is put upon you. Whether you're looking for it or not, you're running into it. And because of that, you are blameless. This is something else that's not very popular and not going to be said in church. But women are not held as responsible as men are, biblically speaking. Eve was tricked. She was victimized. If Adam would have done the right thing, they would have never left that garden. Because sin in general is different. It means something a little bit different from a masculine perspective as opposed to a feminine perspective. You might be born into sin, quote unquote, but there's a limit to that as a woman. There's a reason why the Bible says it's the sins of the father inherited from the male line going back 4 generations. It specifically says the sins of the father from the male line going back. It doesn't say that about the females. Open it up. It doesn't say that about women. You are not responsible for the sins of your father as a woman. You are entitled to the love of God. Men are a little bit different. Men owe God something. It's the sins of the father going back 4 generations. Men owe God. Adam owes God. And it requires a man like Christ, from a man's perspective, to pay that ransom. From a woman's perspective, it's just about receiving the love of Christ. From a man's perspective, you better know God. If you don't know God like Adam knew God, you're not there yet. You're not quite a born-again Christian as a man. You've got to know God the way Adam knew God. You got to know God the way Moses knew God. But one way or another, that is in your cards as a man. There's a timing for that. That'll either happen on your deathbed or it'll happen in this life. In this life. Jesus said you must be born again in the Spirit. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean, please God, forgive me of my sins. It means you remember your purpose as a man. With a man, you must relinquish your ego and let go and give back to God the gifts that were given to you before it blows up in your face. That's the difference between the journey of a man and a woman. I'm about ready to talk about Christian magic, and no, that's not witchcraft. Have you guys heard of the Magi? They were kind of like astrologers. But they weren't evil. They found Christ through astrology. The kind of astrology that's from God. And when I'm talking about the changings of the seasons, men are easy. Because men are like the solar cycle. The solar cycle is very easy to understand. Women are like the lunar cycle. The moon cycle is complicated. And this is not astrology in the sense of witchcraft. This is the way that God set this up. The lunar cycle is a lot like a woman's cycle. This is obvious. This is stuff that you can read on Wikipedia, man. So I want to get into the real divine revelation. But it's obvious that the lunar cycle, there's a connection between that and ovulation. And the 9.5 months ain't quite a year. Because to understand the lunar side of things, you start to unpack what's happening inside of a woman's body. The moon is receiving the light of the sun. It's receiving. The moon is not responsible for the light that's being shined upon it. Who's to blame for the light that's being shined on the moon? And that's the reason why women need to forgive themselves and recognize it's okay to blame men for being losers. If you are married to a loser, blame him. Blame him. Blame your father. Blame your husband for being a dork. It's not your fault. But if you're a man and you blame your father or you blame your mother, you're not quite a man. If you're blaming others as a man for your life, you're not quite a man, but men are different from women. So you have the winter solstice and the summer solstice. Those are 2 ends of the clock, the cosmic clock. You got the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And at each of these periods of time in a given year, there's an opportunity there. But the best time to vocalize what you want, what it is that your heart desires are, is early in the year. And the reason why is because you're speaking into the darkness. You're speaking into the void. You're doing precisely what God did in Genesis. Now, you're not God, but you're made in the image of God. During the winter time and the summertime, one gender is weakened and the other one is strengthened in a way. So the summertime, you might assume, is the male's specialty. You think that, well, a man's the strongest in the summer because the sun's out in full throttle. But the truth of the matter is, pride cometh before the fall. What does that mean? A lot of people only scratch the surface of that. And they go, yeah, pride cometh before the fall. Yeah. But they don't realize that God's also talking about the seasons. He's talking about the season of fall as well. When the sun is at the highest point, when the days are the longest, what we know as the summer solstice, this is very practical. Men tend to be overextended a little bit. They've been planting and doing all kinds of work during the spring, and they start to overdo it. They start to overextend what it is that they need to do. They tend to scorch the earth. And they typically, what ends up happening during the summer, I'm going to back this up biblically for you guys want to know. I'm going to bring up some biblical examples of this, like Samson. When the sun is at the highest point, they tend to plant the seeds of their own demise. So they've been planting good seeds through spring. This is especially true for sinful men. Men plant the seeds of their own demise during the summer solstice of every year, or the summer solstice of their life. We talked about the life, the peak of your life. When you're at the very height of your life, that's when you make the dumbest mistakes as a man. When you're at your strongest. It's biblical. I want to lay down an example. King David. King David, at the height of his glory. King David wasn't exactly Jesus. He made the worst errors of his life when he was at his strongest. The peak, you could say, of his power is when he sowed the seeds that brought down the nation of Israel ultimately. This can be applied also to non-Christians, because every man follows this pattern in their life. They'll reach a peak of their life, the height of their life, and they will plant the seeds of their own demise. Usually it's their kids. King David's case, it was his kids. Usually it's their kids, but not always. But it's usually the kids that do it. And if you don't believe in God, watch Star Wars. Darth Vader planted the seeds of his own demise as he reached his height as a Jedi Knight. Brought about Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, which ultimately would mess his life up. Mess up his dark empire. Good for him. At his height, Darth Vader flips to the dark side. At his height, when he's at his best, he's vulnerable. This is true about Lucifer. You understand what I'm saying? This is true about the devil. This is true about King David at his height. Solomon in all of his glory, wishing for wisdom. At his height, he makes the errors that brings down his kingdom. This is true about every man. The seeds that you are planting, there's a way around this. There's only one way around this, and that is Christ. And the winter solstice, as a man, you need to speak, vocalize what it is that you are looking for, where your heart is. Because just like Genesis 1:1, when the sun is at its lowest and the void is darkest, when you speak into that void, it has the most power. Just like a candle in the dark. A candle in the dark has a lot more power than a candle out in broad daylight. Light a candle, go out at noon, and see how well it works. Light a candle at midnight. Midnight on the cosmic clock, on the yearly clock, is December. That's why I've got this clock over here. The darkest time of the day is equivalent to the winter of your year. The darkest time of your life, you have the most opportunity to make big changes. The brightest time of your life, watch out. You're likely going to make a big mistake. Because the brightest time of your life needs to be spent receiving and listening. You cannot outshine the sun at the brightest time of your life. You cannot outshine God. If you don't believe in God, believe in the sun. You cannot outshine the sun. The best time of the day to make changes in your life there's 2 different times a day. Can you guess? Who can guess? First thing in the morning and the last thing you do before bed. Those are the 2 times of the day that you can make the biggest impact on what's going to happen in your life. This is true regardless of your dogma. It's true psychologically. The first thing that you say in the morning, if it is a word of thanksgiving, it carries your whole day. If the last thing you do before bed is whine and complain, it sets the tone for the next day. Because in between those two periods, you do a thing called sleep. When you sleep, your brain processes largely the last thing that you put in it, and that becomes integrated deeply into your subconscious. And then you perform that the next day. If you do at the beginning of the morning, in the very beginning of the morning, you have an opportunity to reset that. If you get in the habit of prayer, vocally, or doing music in the morning, getting up and praise and worshiping, getting up and singing YMCA, whatever it is that you believe in. If you get up in the morning and start your day like that every single day, that will transform your life and your day. That's how you use this daily. The peak time of the day is the worst time to make plans. 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., these are not good hours of the day to try to get more done. If you decide to invest in the stock market when you're 55, that's like trying in your day, trying to get something done last minute. Last minute, I'm going to mow the grass at 9 p.m., and it takes me 3 hours to mow the grass. Let's say, for example, 9 p.m. is the worst time to do it. Because the last thing you're going to remember before you go to bed is mowing the grass. And that's exactly what you're going to carry with you the next day. Don't mow the grass at night. Don't mow the grass first thing in the morning. Do it naturally through the day. I'm just letting you guys know that there's a timing to this stuff. Even Jesus falls under this category. His fall and resurrection had to come from what? The seeds that he planted. If this is true about Jesus, this is true about everyone that's a man. But every single thing that's a pattern in your life is the exact same pattern of the universe, whether you believe in God or not. The exact same pattern is over and over and over again. The pattern of the Bible, Genesis to Revelations, winter, spring, summer, and fall. We're in the harvest season right now. Your life, winter, summer, spring, and fall. Your week, the beginning of the week, where does that start? It starts on the Sabbath, Saturday. Winter, summer, spring, and fall. Your day, the darkest parts of the day, winter. Spring is next, the morning. Summer, afternoon. Fall, the setting of the sun. This is the same pattern. You've got to really be dense not to see this. God is really got a lot of patience with us. The Bible is real and true because it's speaking of the same pattern in every aspect of your life. Even if you don't read the Bible's being read to you. It's being read to you in your day-to-day experience. You see, whether you open it or not, I want to let you know this, that every single day you have an opportunity to rededicate yourself to your purpose. You have an opportunity you got to know what time of day to do that. It's the morning and the night. The morning and the night. When things are the darkest, you have the most opportunity to make real changes in your life. This is true regardless of your religion. This is just how the universe works. This is how it was created. Take advantage of that. It's the same pattern. This is just how the universe works. That's how it works. And it does matter what part of the world you're in. That's a whole other thing, which, I could really go deep into that. But whether you live in America or whether you live in Russia, whether you live in a cold area where there's only 10 hours of daylight, or you live on the equator where there's 20 hours of daylight, it does make a difference what part of the earth you're on when it comes to your mood, when it comes to your motivation, when it comes to your lifestyle. It does matter. You got to take that into consideration. And you best be humbling yourself. The greatest harvest happened here in the United States because of the way that our seasons change. This is a scientific fact. So it actually proves that what I'm saying is true. If you move your seasons using the same strategy that the United States naturally does, not the country, but the land, you will reap the kind of harvest that this country has in your life. So there's a difference between witchcraft and godly magic. You go, well, magic is witchcraft. No, it's not. There's these people called the Magi. Have you heard of them? You should look it up. And they were astrologers. Oh! But they were godly astrologers. They were kind of astrologers that could find Jesus in the middle of nowhere. You could say that it's evil that has twisted this into witchcraft. But originally, this was all God. It was all God. Universal truths that transcend sin is how God's clock works. God's seasons. If you look at Genesis to Revelations, it's not just a story in a Bible. We're talking about the Genesis is like the winter, the void, the darkness. God speaks into it. And then comes what? Then comes spring. Life springs into action. And in the springtime came the rise of the Jewish people, leading all the way into the summer of the Bible, which is the 400-year drought between the Old and New Testament. At the end of the summer solstice is the fall, following the Christ's death. And now we are in harvest season. 2,000 years of harvest. This should give you an idea of what's coming next. Which is what? The death of the year and the rebirth of a new heaven and a new earth. We are at the edge of harvest season. Things are as plentiful as they've ever been. We are in the Thanksgiving of God's timeline. We're about ready to enter into the holiday season, which includes Revelation. Rejoice when you see these things, God says. When you see, wars, rumors and wars and all this, you can whine and complain and cry about it. Just like in the wintertime when you see Christmas is coming and you see the leaves have fallen and the trees are barren and it's getting colder. Jesus says in the time of the end, the love of many shall grow cold. Why does he say that? Because Revelations happens at the beginning of winter or the very end of fall. Revelations happens at the very end of fall. Revelations happens at the very end of fall. People begin, the hearts of many become cold. And that leads to Revelations, the end of the world, as people say. It's really the end of the age. In our case, it's the end of the year. And a rebirth, a recreation, cycles all over again. A new heaven, a new earth. That's how God's timeline works biblically. So that's the first part. Your life has a winter, summer, spring, and fall. You need to know what stage of life you're in. How does your life progress? It's not your age number. You could be 15, you can be 50. What matters is how far along are you on your purpose. You could be 50 years old and have the mentality of a 15-year-old and live to be 100. Or you can be 15 and feel like you're 40. What's the best time to pray? All year round. But there's a special time of the year which happens around Christmas time to the beginning of New Year, where it's the darkest. And when it's the darkest, what you speak has the greatest effect. Because we are made in the image of God. We may not be the sun, but we're like candles. And candles have the greatest effect in the darkest times. This is true about your life too. When you let your light shine in your life during the darkest times, it has the greatest effect. Shine your light the most in the darkest times. When it's bright, hold back. It's time to listen. You're more likely to stub your toe if you're trying to out-talk God and the brightest times of the day. Instead, speak songs of thanksgiving and listen. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what Ecclesiastes 3 is telling you. There's a time for every purpose.